Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat swadharme nidanam shreyah paradharmo bhayavaha. Arjuna uvacha arhavena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha aniccham napi vasneya baladivati yojitaha. Sri Bhagavanuvāca kāmayesha krodayesha rajo guna samudbhava
Bhagavan says here that it is desire, it is anger born out of the active, which is the Rajoguna, all devouring, all sinful. Know this as the four here. So identifying the enemy for Arjuna, that who is the real enemy? It's the internal enemy, which he talks about here as two things. One is the anger and the other one is the desire. And these two things we saw are really one and the same thing. They are like the opposite sides of the coin. Wherever you have desire, there is very likelihood to be anger. And whereas there is anger, the underlying essence of anger is what? Is also desire. Okay. So we've been brought to this point by trying to understand really what is it which we are trying to do here with desire and so on, and how is it related to the idea of purification. Purification is going to result, like he's saying, that it is not for you to actually go on this path of knowledge yet, because you need to do your karma yoga, you need to do your actions in the world, you need to do your swadharma, and that swadharma according to Arjuna is to be a Kshatriya and to fight in this battlefield. And doing that in the right way will lead towards purification. So whatever your nature is, whatever your swabhav is, that has to be transformed in such a way that it results in purification. And that purification is going to come through a certain way of being in the world, certain way of transacting in the world, and doing the things which are required to be done, the bounden duty. Okay, the bounden duty is what needs to be done, and therefore when you do that in the right way, with the right action, with the right attitude of mind, then what happens is that we get purification of the nature, swabhava, and this purification comes through purusharth, and purusharth is required so that the exertion of the will and the buddhi, because really buddhi is the key element in this whole process. Okay. Buddhi in terms of two things. One is that buddhi needs to have the awareness. Awareness, without awareness, we are not going to get anywhere, right? So as soon as the thought arises that here is something which is pushing me towards this direction, okay, here's the desire which is pushing me towards the outer world, towards the world of objects and things. If we are not aware of it, what is going to happen, right? We are just going to be pushed in that direction, and before we know it, we are caught up in the mechanism of action, impressions, and conditioning and reconditioning. So awareness is required. As far as the buddhi is concerned, if the awareness is not there, we already lost the battle. Okay. So awareness is required. Secondly, the control of the buddhi requires for us to do what? It requires us to know what is the thought which has come about, aware of the thought which has come about, and at the same time to be able to change that thought in a different direction. Okay. So whereas the swabhav will tell me, now go and do this, that and the other, because I like this and I don't like this, and therefore liking this I go towards that, my buddhi will tell me, no, hang on, this is not the right way of going about it, because this is the vasana which I've been entertaining all this time, and because of that this desire has become stronger and stronger and stronger, and therefore that is an expression of my vasanas and my desires. Hang on, I don't want to do that. I will do something else. I will make a choice between what is my vasana telling me and what is my swadharma telling me. Now with that choice coming through the buddhi, that is what the purusharth is all about. Okay. So in terms of that, if the buddhi is not aware and it is not able to make those right choices at the right time, then we are back to square one. So it means that the inner purification can only come when this buddhi is active in that way, and then what happens is that the swabhava becomes more and more purified. In other words, what is happening to the inner nature, or our nature as it was before we started our sadhana, is that it was full of rajas and tamas. Okay, mostly 90% of the people will have rajas and tamas as the predominant gunas within their nature, which means they're externally orientated. They're doing things in the world. They're trying to attain their desires, fulfill their desires in the world, and so on and so on. And the process of purification leads towards more and more preponderance of this sattva guna. Okay? So the desires become more and more sattvic. And we'll see that, he is in the next verse, when he talks about the three different levels of how the wisdom is covered up, that it is really the sattvic which we need to aim for in terms of the purification. And the connection between the sattva guna and swadharma is what? The swadharma is really an expression of the sattvic guna in terms of a transactional world. Now that has to be understood, because some people say, now why do duty, and all this question about doing your bounden duty and doing your dharma, what is that all about? It is really nothing but to say that here's a sattvic desire, and the expression of sattvic desire is really nothing but doing our swadharma. And you can read it the other way around as well, that when you do your swadharma, what are you doing? We are actually taking the option, or making the choice which is going to lead towards the expression of a sattvic desire. So as we express more and more of our sattvic desires through swadharma, then what happens is that the purification will take place, on the one hand, by creating the strength and the intensity of the sattvic desire for expression again and again, and also the kind of lowering of the intensity of the rajas and the tamas. So both ways, the Purushartha is going to lead us towards that inner purification. And then he says that it is better to do one's duty than to do somebody else's, because doing somebody else's duty means what? It means I'm still acting according to my likes and dislikes. I'm not doing the thing which is going to result in purification. The purification can only result if I do my own dharma, even if it's done badly to start with. Okay? It's better to do that than to do something, to do another's duty. And of course this is a direct reference to Arjuna, to tell him that you're not a Brahmin, okay? So don't try to behave like a Brahmin. If you are a Kshatriya, that is how you need to take that nature which is there in terms of who you are and what you are, and then turn it towards swadharma. Turn it towards the way of being in the world, which is going to lead towards purification. Because if you try to behave like a Brahmana, then what will happen is that you are saying, I don't like doing the battle, I like being a Brahmana, because it takes me away from all this difficulty of fighting the battle. And therefore, based on that likes and dislike, if you try to become a Brahmana, it's not going to result in any purification. In fact, it is just doing what? It is strengthening your likes and dislikes. And therefore, we are back to square one. Better to do one's own dharma than to do somebody else's dharma, even if you do it perfectly. The perfection is not going to result the perfection of your inner nature. Okay? That perfection of somebody else's duty is going to create even more problem. Okay? So better not to go to that. And I mentioned the story about the three servants. So that those three servants are really the expressions of how we can go about controlling our mind, controlling the senses, so that we do the right thing when we are in the marketplace. And we are always in the marketplace, one way or the other. This is our market, this is our kshetra, okay? This is our field of activity. And this field of activity means that wherever we are, if we are not aware and we are not using the buddhi, what's going to happen? We're going to spend all the money, doing the things which we like to do, and forget about what the landlord has told us, what the landowner has told us, what the Lord, who is the Lord of everybody, has told us to do. Okay? So when we come here, we've been sent here in this marketplace called the world, right, to do something. To do what? To make sure that we do the right thing for the Lord, and then we get released, because the Lord says, now you've done your job, come and stay with me. If we don't do the right thing and we spend all the money, he says, now you have to go back because you have not completed the task. So in other words, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to really know our own true nature. If we don't know, next time we'll have to come back again because we have not done our job. Okay? And again and again and again, that is the way in which we go back and forth in this cycle of birth and death. Okay? So the servants going into the marketplace is the same as us coming into the life, doing the wrong things and going back again and being sent back again into the market. So it means that if we don't do the things which we are supposed to do, in other words, our swadharma, it means no purification is going to take place. If purification does not take place, back to square one. We come back to the cycle of birth and death. And then Lord Krishna says that Arjuna is asking now, he wants to identify what is it which is making everybody to actually not carry out their swadharma. In other words, that when he talks about papa, he is not talking about breaking a rule or breaking a commandment. In this sense, papa means what? Papa means that he is actually saying that something which goes against the what you call the sattvic desire, and it goes against, and that is the papa which is taking us towards samsara and identification and suffering. Anything which is taking us towards identification with the body, mind, intellect and leads to suffering is called papa. Okay? And punya is that which is meritorious, which leads us towards the expression of sattvic desires, and therefore it leads us towards happiness, contentment, and it is going to lead us eventually towards liberation. So if we say, what is this papa? Then he says, what is it which is making everybody to turn towards samsara and identification and all this kind of thing, and therefore get away from this true purpose of life, which is liberation, which is knowing who I truly am. What is it which is making me not be able to do that? Who is that enemy? Okay, and then Lord Krishna tells him who the enemy is, and the enemy is Kama and Krodha. Okay? And then this is the force, like he's saying, what is that force which is impelling me to do the things which I should not be doing, but I'm as if I am impelled to do, as if there is some force which is making me do it. Okay? So here's the force which is created within the subliminal layers of the individual, which are the vasanas, and they create such a outward flowing force which is making all the thoughts to appear in the mind and desires in the intellect, and making me to go towards that which the desire wants in the external world. And that is the force which is being described here, and therefore he says, what is it which is making me to do that? It is Kama and Krodha. And we saw that this is something which is born of the Rajoguna. So the Rajas is that guna which is the one which causes activity, and it causes the movement within the Prakriti. And the Prakriti is moved by this quality called Rajas. And this Rajas is the one which, when it functions through the individual, the Rajas functioning through the layers of the individual, in terms of the different layers of the individual, will create different movements. So the movement in the body, for example, is the movement which is created by Rajas. The movement in the mind, in terms of the feelings don't remain where they are. They keep on changing. They keep on going all over the place, right? What is that energy which is making it to do that? It is the Rajasic element, which is going to make it go round and round and round. And similarly, the vrittis in the intellect, I mean all the different kinds of thoughts which are arising in the buddhi, are due to that Rajasic element which is pushing the vasanas into the consciousness, into the awareness, and making the thoughts come up again and again and again in different ways, in different times, and different things about different things. And when we look at this desire and anger, these are the two things which are the opposite sides of the coin. So where there is desire, there is likely to be anger. Okay? It's an inbuilt thing. So if the desire is fulfilled, then we get pleasure. If the desire is not fulfilled, there is an obstacle to the desire. What happens is we get frustrated, and that frustration is now the seed for the anger to develop. And similarly, if there is an anger, that means that there is a desire which has already been obstructed, and that obstruction of that desire has caused this anger which is being experienced at this particular time. And he says this is all devouring, which means it is something which consumes us. And I was telling you earlier about, this idea that this desire sometimes can be so strong that it can just overtake everything. Okay? And we've seen, the tongue, which I was telling about. The tongue can pull you in for miles and miles to say, actually, I want to go and eat something which is on the other side of London, and I want to go and eat it because I love it so much. Right? And we've all done that. I'm sure we have. And it is only because of that force which is there. So when Arjuna is asking, what is this force which is making me to do that? It is this desire. The desire is the one which creates that enormous force which makes us to do things in the world, and it is born of Rajoguna. So it is active. It makes us to be active in the world to fulfill our desires, and the fulfillment of our desires, then if it is fulfilled again and again, will strengthen the vasana. At the same time, if it is frustrated, then it will result in anger. And it is all devouring. And it is all sinful. Mahapapa. Okay? Papa and Mahapapa. Mahapapa means that it is really sinful in that way. Why? Because, like I was saying earlier, Papa really means the me and the mine. It is about identification. When desire is expressed in this way, what happens is that the identification becomes more and more validated by that desire being expressed. And when it is validated that I am the doer and I am the enjoyer of the result of the action, that identity is strengthened. It is kept there. Even if it's not strengthened, it is still kept there. So the identification and the desire and the vasana, the expression of the vasanas, is really nothing but the affirmation of my own identity. And that affirmation is there because the desire is being expressed. So if I say, now here's a person who is not expressing any desire, here's a person who is just there in terms of not doing anything, one cannot know what kind of a person is it, isn't it? I can't know. I can only know a person through the kind of things they do, and therefore that is an expression of their selves. Okay? And if I say, here's a person who likes doing X, Y, Z, who has got this desire, who expresses himself in this way by means of various actions and various thoughts and various types of speech, action and thought, here's the expression which is there. That expression is nothing but the expression of the vasanas. So as soon as the vasanas are expressed and the desires are expressed in that way, it affirms that identity, and that identity becomes an expression of those vasanas. Therefore, it is Mahapapa. Mahapapa because why? Because as soon as I get affirmation of my identity in this body, mind, intellect, instead of affirmation that I am Brahman, I am moving right into the problematic area, which is called samsara. It will keep me there as long as I keep on expressing my desires in this way and affirming my identity with the body, mind, intellect. Okay? And he says, know that this is the enemy. So Arjuna, you being the Kshatriya, if you want to identify the enemy amongst all these people, all these things which are going on in your individual self, and I've been talking about the cosmic level, I've been talking about the individual level, I've been talking about Prakriti, I've been talking about the gunas, I've been talking about how all these things is going on. If you want to really pinpoint and find where the target is, right, where to shoot, in other words, this is the enemy. The enemy is desire, and it is anger. And in a sense we can say it is desire, because after all, if we say the flip side of desire is anger, then it is desire, because desire is all devouring, it is all sinful, it is mahapapa. Okay? And therefore you need to deal with that. That is where the action is going to be targeted towards. So how does it relate to what we've been saying earlier? It means that if we identify that really it is the desire which is really the problematic thing, then I have to deal with the desire in what way? By switching that switch in the buddhi, which goes from the desire to the swadharma. Okay. So from desire we go to duty. That is a simple equation. At the end of the day, it's a simple equation which says, how do you deal with the enemy called desire? You actually switch off the desire and switch on the duty. Okay. So the problem arises now, what is my duty? And now that is the question which arises again and again. I'm confused about my duty, exactly what Arjuna was asking. I'm confused about my duty, tell me what to do. But 90% of the time I think we know what is the duty, right? It's only maybe 5% there is a bit of confusion, and maybe just another 5% where it is a grey area, whereby we have to make a choice which is not so easy to make. And mostly those are the areas in which the values are so closely related to what we want to do that we cannot make that fine discrimination between the choice between one particular value and another particular value. Okay. But 90% of the time, I assure you that all of us know, you know and I know what is to be done as far as the Dehavasana is concerned, as far as the Lokavasana is concerned, as far as the Sashtra-vasana is concerned. We know in terms of the Lokavasana, what is it to be in the family, what is your role in the family. We know what is to be done as far as I am concerned in terms of my family, and you in terms of your family. Everybody knows, right? Sometimes it is the desire which then makes us to be confused, because on the one hand it is about the likes and dislikes, on the other hand belonging to the desire, on the other hand it's about the duty, which can seem as if it is a burden. Okay. And that is where the difficult, that's why he says it's the enemy, because it will make you do the things which you should be doing, but it doesn't let you do it because of that strong desire which is devouring your very sense of who you are.
Sometimes isn't duty linked to the desire?
Yeah, in
a family context,
Yes. So we should say that the desire which we are talking about here, there are three types of desire. Like we'll see just now, is that we are talking about the sattvic desire and the tamasic and the rajasic. Most of the desires which we start off with are rajasic and tamasic, which is that it is an expression of myself as an individual identified with myself and what I want rather than what needs to be done. Whereas the sattvic desire, of course, Swadharma has to have the element of some desire, isn't it? The desire, first of all, to carry out my dharma, at the same time to be able to carry out certain actions which are related to doing that duty. So what is that? After all, it has the element of the force, it has the element of the will, it has also the element of discrimination. So these are the common elements between desire and doing the duty. But what is the difference between these two is that the desire is likely to be rajasic and tamasic, whereas the doing our duty is a sattvic desire in the sense, because it is taking the element of what is it taking away from the nature of desire?
Likes and dislikes.
The selfish orientation is taken away. In other words, it is not self-referring desire. it is a desire which is referring to what needs to be done in terms of my position, in terms of my life situation, in terms of my stage of life. So that is a different. It is a desire, of course. It is a desire to do the dharma in the first place, and individually, in terms of the actions which I am doing, it still carries the energy which the other desires are carrying. Okay, so it is sattva plus a bit of rajas. It requires rajas to, in order for it to express itself anyway. Okay, so we were saying that, you know, this is pinpointing actually where the action should take place. Okay, so just like, you know, if you're a manager in your department, and here you've got a problem, and the, you know, all the KPIs are going down. KPI, you know what it is, right?
Key performance.
Yeah, so all the performance is going down, and you don't know what is going on, right? So you analyze and you analyze and you analyze the situation, and you find, I know where this problem is now. It is either the person or the process, okay? And you identify this is the person, and he's messing up this process, and in that case, what has happened is that the output of the department is suffering. It has gone down. So in the same way, Lord Krishna has completely pinpointed where the problem is. Okay, so he says, you know, let's not try to, you know, do all these things, and yes, of course, we need to understand the whole mechanism and the whole process and the different elements of what is happening. But if you want to know what is the key item in all this, whole mechanism of the individual, then we can identify that as the desire. And that desire, which is the enemy, does what? It covers up the wisdom. Okay? And the wisdom, which is the knowledge, if it covers up the knowledge to 3 different degrees, in 3 different ways, then it is going to lead us back into samsara. It is going to lead us back into identification. So let's read the next verse, which the Lord now illustrates how desire is our enemy, our foe, and how it weighs our discrimination. So again, it is emphasizing that not only do we have to deal with desire, but we have to deal with the desire through this specific instrument of the buddhi. Okay? Discrimination is what is required. So let's chant this next verse.
Dhumena priyate vannihi yata darsho malena cha yato bena vrito garbha tata tene damavritam.
Okay. I think what we can do is if you chant it like that and everybody chants together, just like you do it in the practice. Yeah.
We'll all chant it together. Dhumena priyate vannihi yata darsho malena cha yato dvena vrito garbha tatha tene namavritam.
Good. Okay. So, how does desire become the enemy, and how does it cover our discrimination, or the not only the discrimination but the knowledge itself? How does it cover it up? He says, as fire is enveloped by smoke, as mirror by dust, as an embryo by the womb, so this wisdom is enveloped by that desire or anger. So, how are we to understand it? First of all, we've got to kind of consider where we've been he's been leading us through this argument about the swabhava and swadharma, and then pinpointing where the issue is, where the problem is going to be in terms of converting from Swabhav to Swadharma. In other words, changing over from desire to duty. What is going to be the problem, and what is it which is making us to do the things which should be done, which is our duty, and what is it which is impelling me to do the other thing? And he says this is the desire, and therefore desire is the one which is going to keep us back again, making us to go back again and again to our identity, and that identification then becomes the problem. So that expression of the Prakriti in terms of the three gunas is what we got to understand. And he says that as we move up from tamas into sattva, then it becomes easier and easier to deal with this desire. So in this case he's talking about the three different types of covering. The three different types of covering are the sattvic covering, the rajasic covering, and the tamasic covering. And it is also related to the sattvic desires, the rajasic desires, and the tamasic desires. And we'll see each one of these now. So he says, as the fire is enveloped by the smoke, mirrored by the dust, embroidered by the wound. So here are the three examples. So if we look at the first one, and we say, okay, before that, the very reason why we are here, as I mentioned last time, is that there are some vasanas and karmas which have propelled us into this particular birth. Okay. We have come into existence in this particular body, in this time, with a certain group of people into which we are born, and therefore that is an expression of God. It is an expression of our vasanas. Vasanas has brought us here so that we can get the opportunity, or it is a way in which the vasanas have propelled us into this particular birth, in terms of expressing those vasanas through the Prakriti, and therefore the birth is taken because of those vasanas. And if the vasanas are already there, therefore the jiva is already born with the vasanas, okay? And if the jiva is born with the vasanas, it means the expression of the vasanas is ever going to be there, because that is the reason why we have been propelled into this birth. Now, when these desires are there, it means that they will have a certain kind of texture, a certain composition. Okay? So we will find that when we look at children, we find that we can identify the gunas in the children as well. Some children are much more sattvic, some are very rajasic, and some are tamasic as well. Okay? And we find different expressions of those gunas even in the children. Why is that? Because we have come with a certain proportion and a certain kind of texture of the vasanas, an expression of the different types of gunas which can be present in the vasanas. So, in the case of the fire and the smoke, if we start with that, now that is the sattvic desire. So if the desire is sattvic, it is like the smoke which covers the fire. Okay? The fire by itself is not affected by the smoke. Okay? The desires may be there. The sattvic desires will be there, but they can be removed. Even a small breeze will remove that smoke. It will blow it away. It will blow it away to reveal what? Reveal the fire which is there. Okay? In other words, it's a very light covering, and therefore the wisdom which is there has got a very light covering, and the light covering can be removed even by a breeze. Okay? So in other words, a sattvic person with the sattvic desires will be to a point whereby now he is almost there to experience that knowledge directly. Okay? So the buddhi has become purified to that extent whereby only the sattvic desires remain, and those sattvic desires begin to reflect the pure consciousness in the buddhi in such a way that just the removal of that smoke which is the sattvic desire, if that smoke is removed, it reveals the wisdom. The wisdom is very near. Okay? The wisdom is very near. It is only covered by this very light covering called the smoke, and that smoke can be removed just like that. Okay. So in other words, when the sattvic desires become more in terms of our desires, then those are easier to remove than if we go right down to the other side, okay, as we'll see. So the knowledge and the realization which is just lying there and which is being now covered by this thin veil can be removed quite easily without disturbing that knowledge and without disturbing whatever is going on. Now that is related to the buddhi. Okay? So we'll see that it is, at the level of the buddhi, it is the sattvic aspect which is being expressed, and that sattvic aspect with a purified buddhi, with a sattvic desire, it is very easy to now get into the knowledge, because there is only a light covering of the knowledge by the sattvic desire. And it doesn't take long to do that. And when we go to the second level, this is where now the mind comes into play, because this is like the dust in the mirror. Okay, the mirror is already there, but if we leave the mirror for some time, what happens? The dust begins to accumulate on it. Is the dust going to disappear just like that? Okay. The dust is not going to disappear just like that. Okay. It means that there is something which needs to be done. An action needs to be done in order for me to remove the dust which is on the mirror. In other words, I need to take a cloth, I need to do some action on the mirror, and that mirror then becomes clean. And if the mirror becomes clean, then what is the difference between a clean mirror and a covered mirror? Okay. The wisdom is there. Okay, but the wisdom is now covered up with the dust, and that dust requires to be removed, and therefore it requires action, and that action will uncover the mirror which was already existing, and in uncovering the mirror, it kind of retrieves its capacity to reflect. Okay. So the mind has got the capacity to reflect the pure consciousness in that way, and it is now covered up by dust which needs to be removed by action, and that action will be removed through the action will be related to the desires being expressed in terms of the swadharma, in terms of doing the bounden duty, and when that happens, that is like cleaning the mirror. So if we were talking about the smoke which requires only a slight breeze, it requires only a small amount of effort. Here there may be more effort which is required. Okay. And this is because it is full of rajas, and the rajasic energy which is playing through the mind is like the dust which is covering the mirror. So that's another level of covering of the wisdom which requires for us to think about how that dust can be removed. Now, what does it mean in terms of the mind itself? The mind is full of desire. If it is full of rajas and it is full of energy, then what happens is that the mind is continuously being agitated. Okay? And that agitation itself is vikshepa. Okay? That vikshepa is what we have said earlier, is like something which cannot make the mind to focus, it cannot allow the mind to concentrate, it cannot allow the mind to become single pointed, and therefore it will go all over the place. It is the monkey mind. And that monkey mind is just like that rajasic energy which keeps on going from here, one branch to the next branch. Okay. And if that is the case, then that Vikshepa will cover up that knowledge. In other words, that we are too busy thinking about other things and too busy going from one thought to the other for us to focus on the knowledge. So in reality, this example is telling us that if we want to really remove the dust, it means we have to do what? We have to lower the level of vikshepa or agitation, and that can come through purification, inner purification. And that is the one which is applying to Arjuna at the moment, because Arjuna is being told through some kind of action, through the action in the world, in other words, performing your duty will lessen the amount of energy which is there in terms of the mind, and it will remove that vikshepa. Another way of looking at it is to say, like we say, the three things which obstruct the realization of the self. The things are mala, vikshepa, and avarana. Okay. So we've seen the avarana is really something which is covering the knowledge or covering the sense of our identity, and the vikshepa is the one which is the agitation, which is also covering the knowledge, and the third thing is the mala or the impurities, which are also covering it up. So in this way we can also see that the antakarana, which is the mind, and is covered up by the dust, and that dust can be removed through our what you call the action, some kind of action. That action can either be an action which is outward facing in terms of the duty, or it can be inward facing in terms of focusing the mind by means of taking it towards the higher ideal or the higher self. Whichever way you think of it, it can begin to focus itself. So that's the second thing. Then the third example which is giving us here is the covering of the embryo or the fetus by the womb. Now that is something which is telling us now that once that process has started, in fact there's nothing you can do, okay, and it is related to the level of the body. So once the process of the development of the embryo has started, there is nothing which can happen until the 9 months are over and the child is born. So that process has started, and what it means really is that the covering of the wisdom, if it is covered by the tamasic energies and it is covered by the movements of the body and the karma which is taking place through the body, it means we have to wait now, because already the action has taken place, and the action will result in a certain consequence, and that consequence can be immediate, or the consequence can come after several births. Okay, and that wisdom can be covered up for several births because it is related to that tamasic way of doing things. So in other words, be careful what you are doing because it can bind us for the next 10 births, it can bind us for the next 5 births or whatever, right? So at the level of the body, the actions are performed by the body, and this is the tamasic energy expressing itself through the body, and this tamasic desires are what? Done through the body in terms of the ignorance, in terms of not knowing what I'm doing, and when I don't know what I'm doing, it will have unmeritorious consequences. In other words, it will lead us back to papa. And when that is done, once the action has started, it can the fruition of the action or the consequence of the action can be in this birth, or it can be in another birth. But it will take a long time. It will take a long time, just like when the fetus has started growing, you can't do anything with it. You just have to it go through its own course, and once that happens, after 9 months the child will be born.
Can you give examples of this domestic event?
Yeah, I mean, if for example, the tamasic way, if I do things in life without even knowing why I'm doing it, okay, so I carry out an action, and I don't know why I'm doing it, without even thinking about it, okay, and without analyzing what is going to be the consequence of this action, and not even being bothered about that or being ignorant of that, and then I do it, what happens? We get all kinds of consequences which can bind us back again and again into that kind of cycle. Okay. So doing things without thinking, doing things without understanding, doing things without discrimination means that we are doing things which we don't even know what the consequences are going to be, and therefore it is a very tamasic action. It can lead us towards consequences which can arise even after many lifetimes. Therefore, if that is going to be the case, we are bound for longer periods of time. Whereas in the fire and the smoke, a few months of sadhana or a few years of sadhana just removes that without any problem, because we know exactly what needs to be done, exactly through that awareness and understanding, through that discrimination which is now very finely tuned up, we can just remove that smoke very easily. Whereas here, when we do things without knowing what we are doing, it will lead us to consequences which we don't know of how long it will take to get back onto track again. So the besides these things, of course, then we got the object of desire itself, which comes into the equation. Why? Because as the desires express themselves, they express themselves towards a certain object in the world, and then the experience of that object through that particular desire. So the sattvic object will be different from a tamasic object, and a rajasic object will be different from the sattvic object. At the same time, the experience of the sattvic object is also different from the experience of the tamasic object. So what would be an example of sattvic object? Any idea?
Like the scriptures.
Yeah.
Would be.
Okay. Yeah. Something like that. So anything which is leading us towards the higher is a sattvic object, and the experience of that sattvic object will bring us what? It will bring us a sattvic experience. The sattvic experience is what? It is full of contentment. It is full of peace, and it is full of equanimity. If we experience that kind of peace which results from that kind of association with the object, with the sattvic object, then we are expressing a sattvic desire. Okay. And going from the sattvic desire to the very substratum of the knowledge itself is not that difficult. It becomes much easier. Okay. And once we get all these things together, we see that what Lord Krishna is trying to point Arjuna towards is to understand the enemy, okay, because he said desire is the enemy. So you got to understand first of all who this enemy is, what are the different forms in which it can take, what are the different ways it can be expressed through the different levels of the self. Okay. So expressing through the body, how does the enemy act? Expressing to the mind, expressing to the intellect, and what kind of different kinds of is it a very terrible enemy, or is it just somebody who is an enemy but it can be converted into a friend? What kind of enemy is that? Okay. And how does it where is it located as well. So in the next two verses he's going to tell us about that as well. But just to understand that, the idea is that desire is the central point at which we have to be looking at ourselves. So for you and me, what does it mean? It means I have to say to myself, what is the desire which is being expressed at this moment? What is the experience of the desire which is there at the moment? What is the object of my desire at this moment? Okay. How can I then convert all that desire into a sattvic desire which is going to lead me towards expression of my swadharma rather than the expression of the selfish desire? So awareness of what we are doing and why we are doing it and what is the object of our desire becomes really the most important thing, because if we know the enemy, then we know where to aim for. Okay. And if we don't know the enemy, then it becomes difficult, because we don't know what we are fighting. Okay. And if we don't know what we are fighting or who we are fighting, then it becomes very difficult to detect that enemy and to grab hold of him. So we get to know that what is the desire expressing at this moment in my mind, in my intellect. How is the intellect functioning? Is it discriminating between what is right and what is wrong, etc.? And is the desire in itself, what kind of desire is it? Is it a tamasic desire? Is it a rajasic? Or is it a sattvic desire? And if we become more and more aware, then what happens is that we begin to move and more towards the sattvic desire. Okay? Because we make the choice at the level of the buddhi and say, here's something which I like doing. Okay? Likes and dislikes which are in the senses. Here's something which I like doing, but it is not what I should be doing. But here's something which I should be doing. I will do that. And that is where the switch over comes from desire to duty. And that requires for us to use the buddhi. Okay, Purushartha is related to that. So how that is going to be done, and where do we look for this enemy, in what form does it come, and where is it seated? Like he talks about where the seat of these things are, and he says in the senses, in the mind, in the intellect, they are said to be its seat. Through these it deludes the embodied by veiling the wisdom. So the enemy is in the eyes, in the senses, the enemy is in the mind in different forms, and is hiding there in the intellect as well. So it's hiding all over the place, and it takes different forms and different disguises. And we have to find out, now this is this. I recognize this enemy because it has taken this particular disguise today. And being aware of that, I know what to do with it. Okay? So Lord Krishna will give us further advice on how to do that. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.